Okay, Beis Hashem, so let's continue. Yesterday we started the sugya, Hilchos Tefillah. Let's discuss. We said yesterday that Reb Chaim Kanievsky said that Chiyuv Gomor for everyone to be an absolute baki in Hilchos Tefillah. So that's what we're doing over here. Good morning, Itzi. We're here to discuss Hilchos Tefillah. We're going to go through one by one all the halachas, or not all, I shouldn't say all, halavai all, as many as we possibly can in the time that we have to try and go through as much of Hilchos Tefillah across the board of different shilas that come up, different sugyas that come up in halacha of tefillah, many of which we have not really discussed at this place here before. So let's begin, I guess, right at the beginning. The chiyuv, the mitzvah, and the halacha of davening. Where does it all begin? So the mitzvahs there's a mitzvah to daven every single day. That is the posuk in the Torah that tells us to daven. Says the Gemara, those of you that just started Tainis Ya'eh, that Beis Aleph tells us, what does it mean? How do you serve the Rabbeinu Shalom with your heart? Serve him with all of your heart. How do you serve the Rabbeinu Shalom with your heart? And the answer is simple. Says the Gemara, which means this pasuk, Gabriel, is the makor for davening in the Torah. So it's a mitzvah asay to daven. The Rambam holds, amongst other Rishonim as well, the mitzvah is a mitzvah d'oraisa, true, the zmanim of tefillah, and even the nusach of tefillah, meaning the words that we say, might not be a d'oraisa, but the concept of davening is a d'oraisa, pasuk in the Torah, as I dash in the Gemara Tainis Tav Beis. Comes along the Ramban, and we're not going to go now over here through all the where they get it from, the Makoris and the Nafkaminas and whatever. Clear halacha lamaisa. The Ramban holds, and many others, Rashi and other Rishonim, it's a Rabbanon. The pasuk, okay, Ayin Sham. Now, even the Ramban will be maskim that there are certain times that it is a d'oraisa to daven. For example, an Eis Tzara, when a person has a situation that he's going through, and he's in pain, he's in tsar, he's in a situation that he feels that he doesn't know what to do, he's in a challenging matzav, then even the Ramban will hold at that moment it's a d'oraisa. But it doesn't mean it's a d'oraisa to daven 3 times a day. Okay? So that's the Machoikus Rishonim in this case. But whatever it is, the obligation to daven is for a person every day to be mishabech the Rabbeinu Shalom, to ask for his needs and to give shvach v'hodah to the Rabbeinu Shalom for everything that Hashem has given us in our lives. Now, after Klal Yisrael were in Golus, and they dispersed amongst the nations, came along Ezra Sofer and his Beis Din, 120 Zikanim, many of them Nevi'im. The Gemara in Megillah Daf Yud Zayin Beis tells us, these are the people, by the way, that wrote the script of our Tefillah. So when you open up the Siddur, you're not opening up Stam a Siddur of a script, you're talking about 120 Zikanim, many of them Nevi'im. They wrote it b'nevuah. They wrote the Tefillah, and I once spoke about this when we spoke the Indian of going through the davening and the words of davening, how interesting it is, how we'll sit and, different yeshivas sit for different lengths of time. You'll take a Mishnah apart, and you could sit for weeks on a Mishnah. Try to understand Pshat in the Mishnah, why did the Mishnah write it this way and not that way? What's the Nusach Mishnah, and why is this letter there before that one? Oh, Ma'alach, backwards and forwards, right? There's yeshivas that will spend the ganze Zman on one Mishnah. Unbelievable, right? And the words of Tefillah not. The words of Tefillah are just as important as a Mishnah. Okay, we're dealing with Kama Nevi'im. It's the Gemara in Megillah Daf Yud Zayin. We're dealing with Roat Tefillah. So when you open up, you said it, just remember, you're dealing with Mamash, it was written b'nevuah. The dynamite that was packed within the words of Tefillah is absolutely incredible. So therefore, it was Masak in the Tefillah, specifically Shemona Esra. Many different brachas, one bracha came afterwards, but that we're not going into over there. Ezra was masakin that the amount of tefillahs we daven is equal to the karbonos that we bring in the Beis Hamikdash. That means there are 2 tefillahs every single day. 1, shachris, keneged the tomid shal shachar, tomid shal boike, and mincha, which of course is keneged the tomid shal bein ha'arbayim. So those are the 2 tefillahs that we have got, shachris, and then we got mincha. Mariv, as we know, the Gemara tells us, was masakin. The Gemara in Brochos Chav Zayin and Beis. The Mariv was masakin afterwards, right? It wasn't a chiyuv as shachris and mincha was, but Klal Yisrael, says the Gemara in Brochos, was makabalit as a chiyuv, which means now it would be a chiyuv in that case. Maybe different for women, but al kaponim, men and women over the age of bar and bas mitzvah are chayiv to daven. Women also are chayiv to daven, at least according to most poskim for sure, by shachris and mincha. And even if they're not going to do that, at least they should definitely say Shema. I'm not going to go through now the chiyuvim of a woman, what she should and should not daven. If she does have time, she doesn't have time. We're not going to go into at this moment of time. Of course, the machanach children to daven is also chashuv zach al stine chinuch. But again, not to go through all of these things at this moment of time. Now, let's move on, Rabbi Sai, to one of the main halachas that I want to discuss specifically today. Again, we're going to try to go through many different halachas, but one of the halachas, the sugya of today, is before davening. Now, there's halachas of what a person can and cannot do before davening. And there's a reason for it. As I explained yesterday, all of the halachas of tefillah are not just stam halachas. They're in order for a person that if you makayim these halachas, then your tefillah becomes a better tefillah. Then the reason that Chazal were masakin halachas of davening, before davening, during davening, whatever it may be, is so that a person concentrates, has kavanah, isn't involved in, doesn't get distracted from davening. Which is why it's very important for a person to keep these halachas. Over Pesach, in the Pesach program, we had many types of panels where they ask questions, right? People love these things. Ask any questions, and you have to answer. You do answer, you don't answer, you know the answer, you don't know the answer, whatever. When they asked me, I said, listen, I'm happy to hear the question. I have no idea if I'm going to be able to answer or not. So one of the questions that people were asking specifically was, how do I get more enthusiastic into Yiddishkeit? Like, how do I keep it fresh? How do I keep it geschmack, right? Because sometimes it gets become a little bit autopilot, right? Life becomes a bit like, we just keep on going, like automatically. We learn Shachas, Mincha, Ma'at, Afayomi, we do what we have to do, make a bracha, we bench, we do, we don't, whatever it is. We just go through the motions, right? How do we keep it going? So there are many different answers that were given, and many different suggestions that were given, but one specific idea that I mentioned, which I think is negated here, which is why I'm mentioning it now, is the idea of stopping to think, right? Rosh Pinkus talks about this idea by Tefillah. He says, for example, what happens if a person runs into Mincha, right? Mincha's at 1:10, you're 1:10, run into Mincha, Imam is holding by Kaddish, and he starts Shmoneh, and off you go, right? You have the Imam is by the entrance sometimes. These are the people, they run in right by the entrance, Baruch Hashem. At least they're, careful of the halach and Shulchan Aruch and Erechan Semakuv Beis, which is the halach of not walking in front of Ovel Lefnei HaMespalel, which maybe we'll get to at a different time, walking in front of someone in the middle of Shmoneh Esrei. So right by the entrance, and off they go, right? That's how it is. Imagine a guy davens that way, or imagine Ari, a different guy, that stops for a minute, he comes into the Beis Medrash, he stops, he says, I'm about to talk to the Rabbeinu Shalom. That's it. And that day, 4 seconds, 3 seconds, 5 seconds, I don't know how long it took. And now we daven Shmoneh Esrei. Which guy's going to have a better Shmoneh Esrei? Obviously the second guy. Why? Because he thought about it. There was a hachana. The Gemara tells us that Hasidim Rishonim was an hour before davening, right? Okay, we're not holding there. Oh, but hachana means to prepare. Stop and think about what you're doing. It applies in Yiddishkeit, in every mitzvah, everything that you do. If you stop and think what you're doing and you recognize what you're about to take part in, it could change the whole activity. So the same thing is with davening. So Mimele Chazal came along and they made halachas of what you can and cannot do before davening. One of the reasons was, of course, that a person doesn't get involved and forget davening or get distracted and forget about going to daven. But the other reason is that a person understands. Hold on a second. There's a Rabbeinu Shalom, I need to daven first. And therefore you stop and think for a moment. So let's very quickly go through two halachas. Halacha number one is eating and drinking before davening. Gemara in Brachos Yudalad Amud Aleph, the Gemara asks a kasha. What does it mean when the pasuk says "Lo yiseichlu al hadam"? Don't eat on blood. Says the Gemara. That means do not eat before davening on your blood. What does that mean? By the way, those of you that are a baki in Zohar Kodesh, the Zohar Kodesh Al Pi Kabbalah, the Kabbalah brings it unbelievable. A person eats before davening, so he writes like this. Again, I don't remember exactly the lashon, but the Zohar Kodesh writes that before a person davens, his blood is not settled. Mimela, after davening, your blood settles. If you eat before davening, you're eating at a time that your blood is not settled. If that's the case, that can be very dangerous physically to your body. Okay, the Chinuch writes this many times, that what you eat can actually physically affect, not only spiritually, als contamination, timtum alev, but actually affect yourself physically. So that's what the Zohar Kodesh is telling us. The Mishnah Berurah brings another reason. The Mishnah Berurah brings another reason as well. As Tamazah, you're not allowed to eat before you make any mitzvah. You're not allowed to eat before Dalet Minim. You can't eat before Tkiyah Shofar. Right? We spoke about it by Rosh Hashanah, what to eat, what you cannot eat. But Al Kaponim, that's what it is. And the main reason the Gemara tells us is it's gaiva. Pashut gaiva. What is that? Why is it gaiva? Says the Gemara, because I'm looking after myself before I am being makabel all malchus shamayim. Says the Gemara, that's gaiva. Gaiva is one of the worst things, by the way. The Gemara says about gaiva that if a person is a bal gaiva, the Rabbeinu Shalom and the bal gaiva can't live in the same world. Okay, why that's so? We spoke about it yesterday in the Tanya Sheh. But Al Kaponim, gaiva is very, very bad. But Al Kaponim, the Gemara says, person eats before davening, it's a bal gaiva. You're looking after yourself before you are talking to Rabbeinu Shalom, makabel malchus shamayim. And again, the Zohar Kodesh tells us it's a gefährlich chazach for a person to eat before davening. According to the chinuch, by the way, you look this up, mitzvah Reish Mem Ches, it's an issa d'oraisa. It's an issa min ha-Torah, says the chinuch, to eat before davening. As we pass on the Ravon, the Rad, the Rashbatz, Rabbi Bechai, and others. Most hold that it's only a durabonon. That's the Ritva, that's the Rosh, the Beis Yosef, the Levush, the Taz, the Pimegodim, Shulchan Aruch, Harav, Chayodom, Mishabura, and others that we're dealing with the Durabonon, but upon him, the Shulchan Aruch, Paskins, Halacha Lamaisa, or Chaim Sema Peites, that is also for a person to eat before davening. The exception, of course, is water, coffee, tea. Mishabura says really you shouldn't have milk and sugar in your coffee, but the Meister Poskim say nowadays it's not choshev. It used to be a choshev azach to have milk, to have sugar. Nowadays, it's not really choshev to do so, which is why it's 100% mutar lechatchila for a person to have coffee with milk and sugar, no problem whatsoever. Those who want to be machma bracha, but the Meister the Poskim say there's no mokum. Maybe in a chabura the Poskim say don't drink in a chabura or matzav because a person can forget to daven in that case over there. Without going into all the other details, I want to get to one more halacha. Is if a person is a choila, if a person is sick, right? Then the halacha is, the halacha brings it in peites, the halacha is a person can eat and drink before davening, but he should say at least Birchas HaTorah and the first parasha of Kriyas Shema before eating. Ketzur Shulchan Aruch says if a person is so hungry, possibly he won't be able to have kavana. Right? I mean the Chassidim sometimes they use this to be something, especially Shabbos morning. Meaning by many of the Chassidim must have a piece of cake before davening, whatever. But Akaponim it comes from it gives a person extra koyach. He's not going to be able to cover kavana during davening. There is a mokaim for a person to do that in that case. But again, definitely better to say Birchas HaTorah, first parasha of Kriyas Shema. Obviously, if a person's actually sick, there's no problem. Medication is also not going to be a problem as well. One last thing, Rabbi say, Malacha before Tefillah. Also, very negay Shaila. One of the boys actually asked me, he said to me, am I allowed to go to the gym before davening? It's very negaya. I want to go to the gym, want to work out, have a shower, go to davening. It's going to be a festa shachmas. Imagine a shachmas after the gym, right? It's unbelievable, right? It's a whole different shach. I wouldn't know. I'm sorry. I do not know. I'm not claiming to have any experience in that. I do not know. But those that tell me that they're asking for a friend, that they say, yes, apparently by going to the gym, Gabriel, it's maskim, before I go to the gym and then daven shachmas, a different shachmas, right? So are you or are you not allowed to do that? So without going into too much detail, because I really want to get to this, the Gemara in Brachas Daf Yudalad Manadav tells us that it's also to do various things before davening. Chazal said that once the Zman of Tefillah has arrived, and the Zman of Tefillah really means alois, B'shas Atchat maybe you can get away with nates, but really it's alois. You're not allowed to do things until you've davened Shachris. In that case, one of the examples the Gemara brings, again, this is all the Gemara in Brachas Yudalad, you look this up yourself. The Gemara says you're not allowed to say She'ela Shalom. Right? You can't say shalom. You can't say shalom to your friend. In fact, the Gemara says, Omar Rav, Kol hanoisen she'ela shalom lechaveroi. Anyone that gives shalom to his friend, koidim shispalel, before davening, he do asa bama. It's as if he made a bomber. The Gemara says, what's the pshat? Why? What's so bad? The Gemara says, because one of the names of Hashem is shalom. And therefore, what you're doing is, before davening, if you look at the Maharsha explains why Dafka the Gemara says usually lashon of bomber. What's the bomber is something you're not allowed to build, carbon, mizbeach, whatever. So here you are using the name of Hashem before you actually go to the basic Knesset. You go to shul and daven. That is not a nice thing to do in that case, which is why a person has to be careful. Which means to go over to someone, whether it's a rebbe, a parent, or a friend, and say shalom in that case. So that a poskim say it should not be done, even boiker tov and these sorts of things. However, if a person wants to say hello, Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky Zatzal said that saying hello should not be a problem. If you pass someone and they do say it to you without going out of your way, there's definitely more of a mokim to be makel over there. And of course, if it's someone that's a respectable person, that's a bezoyan, if you don't say something, so in English, a lot of poskim are making in that case. One last thing Rabbi say is doing small things before davening. This is the gym shaila. For example, taking out the garbage. To have something small, the poskim of Shem Zalman says something small is not a problem. Taking out the garbage, making your bed, for example, the poskim debate the shaila. Is it an issa or is it a heta? Most poskim say making making a bed is something so small, it's not something of any, real significance, there's a mocker to be makel, and you could do that as well before davening. If the washing machine is all prepared and you just have to simply press the button, that's also not going to be a problem, according to most poskim as well. Cheftzei shamayim is mutter. So, for example, dealing with the kids before you go to davening, making their sandwiches, getting them ready for cheder, collecting money for stocker. People do that as well. They go around the shul, buying milk for your parents that ask you to go to the store before davening. All those things could be okay. The Shulchan Aruch talks about shopping. Shopping before davening is a problem. You're not allowed to shop. However, Erev Shabbos Kodesh, if you're worried that they're not going to have the food after davening, then there's a mokim to be making Erev Shabbos Kodesh. Before davening, one cannot have a haircut, right? And a person does not have to have a haircut. The poskim do debate the shayla of shaving, and they say that if a person shaves all the time, it's a double poshet. It's like a normal thing for him. That is not a problem. Again, I'm not saying it's a mutter or asa, but those that smoke, the poskim say that there's no problem with smoking before davening, because the dav gives a person a certain kind of, I don't know, no experience, but those that smoke say that apparently it gives a person a different experience and he'll be able to daven better, whatever that may be. Having a shower before davening, the poskim say, especially if a person has a minyan kavua, that he davens every day at that minyan, so he's no problem having a shower. And many people ask me this question after mikvah, they want to know, that's not a portion, but after the mikvah, he wants to have a shower. I see people in the morning that are a little bit makbid on this, but I think there's no problem having a shower. For zichah after mikvah, there's no problem, because it's a chelik about going to the mikvah. But for those that are makbid, some chassidim are makbid not to go to shower after mikvah because they want to keep the water on. I'm talking about, they want to keep the water on, say they don't go to the shower. But those that have a shower afterwards, avada, there's no problem. Stam to have a shower, freshens a person up. It's a normal chelik of doing that, and that would not be a problem. If a person feels that he's going exercising for purposes, to make himself healthy, make himself better, if that's what the purpose is, then there should be no problem with a person doing that. Of course, making sure he has a shomer to make sure that he doesn't forget to daven or get caught up with the working out. They can spend a few hours over there. If that's the case, you've got to be careful, make a shomer to remind you. Learning Torah, by the way, is also included in this, which means once alois or b'diavad maybe mates, you shouldn't really be learning Torah. However, that's only if you're davening b'yechidus by yourself. If you are davening with a minyan kavua every day, the yeshiva davens at 8:30, don't worry about it. Well, Hashem, we found you a heta. You can indeed learn and daven. You can learn. There is no problem whatsoever, especially if you have a shomer, even if you daven by yourself. Going to sleep, by the way, probably not negated to anyone over here, but apparently there are yeshiva bachrim that stay up most of the night, and apparently like at 6, 7 in the morning, that's when they go to sleep, right? Are you allowed to go to sleep before davening? It's a big shayla, whether a person is or not allowed to go. We're talking about a time where it's somuch to the zman, half an hour before a lois be'etzem. A person is not really allowed to go to sleep unless he davens in that case, unless he asks someone to wake him up who has a stark alarm clock, and he normally wakes up with that alarm clock. If he presses snooze the whole time, then it's not really going to help. Rabbi say many more halachas. Mitzvah Hashem, tomorrow we shall continue. Have a wonderful day.